In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King commends the role and contributions of women in Parliament as part of his efforts to maintain an open dialogue with parliamentary blocs. International mediator Lakhdar Brahimi says he is optimistic about the Geneva conference despite stalled talks between government officials and opposition over easing the humanitarian crisis in Syria. And Egypt's interim president's announcement that a presidential vote will be held before parliamentary elections is met with mixed reactions from the Egyptian people. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. His Majesty the King highlighted the role of women in Parliament and commended their contribution to national issues. In a meeting with women parliamentarians as part of His Majesty's efforts to maintain an open dialogue with parliamentary blocs, he said Jordan's democratic march is evolving in a manner that will ensure brighter days ahead to future generations. The King urged enhanced consultations and cooperation between the Parliament and government as a measure that ensures the speedy implementation of priority legislation and promotes further development and reforms. By working as a team, King Abdullah said Jordanians, men and women from all sectors of society, can overcome economic difficulties and other challenges facing the country. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour, present at the meeting, said advancing legislation on political life in Jordan will be enlightened by His Majesty's roadmap set forth in his speech from the throne. The women parliamentarians affirmed their support to His Majesty's vision for comprehensive reforms and pledged their participation in drafting the relevant laws that would meet the aspirations of Jordanian men and women. His Majesty sent a cable to UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, wishing him continued good health and a speedy recovery following a successful surgery he underwent yesterday. The King also wished the UAE further progress and prosperity under the wise leadership of Sheikh Khalifa. King Abdullah also telephoned His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince and Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces, and expressed his sincere wishes for a good health of Sheikh Khalifa. The Senate endorsed the 2014 state budget draft law after it was referred from the lower house of Parliament. During a session chaired by Senate President Abdulrauf Al-Rawabde and attended by Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour and cabinet members, the Senate also listened to a report prepared by the Financial and Economic Committee on the Kingdom's reform program. The Senate also endorsed the draft law of the Independent Government Institutions budget. Senators addressing the session called for remedies to the budget deficit and national debts, recommending an increase in revenues and cuts in spending. Over to the Geneva II conference, and face-to-face talks between Syria's warring parties stalled today over easing the humanitarian crisis in the country. Government and opposition delegations discussed aid and prisoner releases during a morning session which aimed to build some kind of trust between the two sides. International mediator Lakhdar Brahimi said he was optimistic about the talks. The two sides are speaking only through him and not directly to each other. This report has the details.
UN mediator Lakhdar Brahimi called the discussions a good beginning. Brahimi convinced the two sides to focus on the ultimate goal of Geneva II, before even attempting to establish a transitional governing body, and he hoped that the Syrian authorities would approve access for an aid convoy to reach Homs by tomorrow.
We haven't achieved much, but we are continuing. The two delegations are here.
Syrian government and opposition delegates face each other for the second day from across a negotiating table at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva. Brahimi, who is mediating the talks, tried to secure progress over the weekend on humanitarian aid, local ceasefires and prisoner releases to build up support inside Syria for the talks before embarking on the tougher political negotiations.
We give priority to women and children and the most vulnerable detainees, for example, the people who has illness or they need medical care. We give priority for that.
Government delegates said they were ready to discuss all issues presented by Brahimi, but that it was a mistake to focus on individual or local issues.
One question we ask these people who are here, who do they represent? How many Syrian people do they represent? This does not need confidence building measure. It needs real care for Syria and for the Syrian people and real will and effort to stop this terrorism from which our Syrian people are suffering.
Meanwhile, the opposition maintained that the government side is stalling over the issue of aid to Homs. Residents of the besieged city called on participants in the talks to work to break the siege of the rebel-held city, surrounded by government forces for 18 months. Homs was one of the early centers of protest against Bashar al-Assad's rule in 2011.
We want from Geneva to break the siege and make us safe roads and get us out of here. We want care for these people. We don't want food.
Faced with finding common ground between the two intractably opposed parties, Brahimi had dedicated the first 2 days of talks to humanitarian issues, hoping to create a platform on which to build the far tougher political talks. Tomorrow he plans to start addressing what he has called the core issue of the talks, that is implementing the June 2012 Accord. Loy Balkar for the news at 10.
In the continued violence in Iraq, 3 car bombs went off in the city of Kirkuk, killing at least 4 people and wounding 14 others. The first blast took place in Rahim Awa district in the northern part of the city, killing 3 civilians and wounding 6 others, while 2 other car bombs in the southern part of the city killed 1 civilian. The oil-rich Kirkuk is situated on the front line of a dispute between the Shiite-led central government in Baghdad and ethnic Kurds who want the city to be incorporated into their autonomous region in the north of the country. A referendum to determine Kirkuk's status is yet to take place. Meanwhile, Iraqi government forces battling al-Qaeda-linked militants intensified airstrikes and artillery fire on the rebel-held city of Fallujah. At least 7 people were killed and 42 were injured, according to hospital officials and tribal leaders. Earlier today, and according to local sources, the militants attacked an army post in southern Fallujah and seized 2 Humvee vehicles and destroyed a third. Iraqi security forces have yet to up a loose cordon around Fallujah and have clashed sporadically with insurgents inside. But they have held off from an all-out offensive to give community leaders and tribesmen time to convince the gunmen to withdraw. Egypt's interim president Adli Mansour announced this afternoon that a presidential vote will be held before parliamentary election, under a timetable agreed after Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi was deposed. Parliamentary elections would be held first. But today Mansour said in a televised speech he will amend the roadmap. Many critics had campaigned for a change in the roadmap, saying the country needed an elected leader to direct government at a time of economic and political crisis and to forge a political alliance before a parliamentary election. A new constitution voted in earlier this month allowed for a change in the order of elections by leaving open the question of which vote should come first. On the streets of Cairo, there were mixed reactions to the announcement. Many supported the decision and said that General Abdel Fattah Sisi should be Egypt's next president. Others said parliamentary elections should come first to allow the deputies oversight power over the president, who is also supposed to swear the oath in front of Parliament. Most people, however, said they hope for stability to be reinstated in the country. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Paris in the afternoon to oppose policies of French President François Hollande's government. Demonstrators gathered at the Place de la Bastille to protest a number of issues, including a law authorizing gay marriage and a new environmental tax. They held flags and banners and chanted "France is angry," calling on Hollande to resign. One banner read, "One dad, one mom for all children, and the family is in danger." The demonstrators also called for scrapping a tax on heavy good vehicles, through which the government aims to raise more than €1 billion a year to finance mostly rail infrastructure projects. The 59-year-old Hollande is most unpopular president in modern France, according to polls. Over to Ukraine, where police clashed with protesters in central Kiev as the fate of the government remained uncertain after the president offered key posts to opposition leaders. One opposition leader described the offer as a poisoned attempt to divide the opposition and kill off mass protests. The two-month standoff has sparked the worst violence in Ukraine since it won independence in 1991, and the crisis has deepened tension between Russia and the West. This report has more.
Hoping to end violent protests that have rocked Ukraine, President Viktor Yanukovych offered the opposition several top government posts. But opposition leader Arseniy Yatsenyuk has rejected the post of prime minister.
To be honest, we were not happy about the proposal. I am perfectly aware about what's going on in the country now. The country is on the verge of bankruptcy. They've robbed the country in the past 3.5 years to the extent that the treasury is empty. The country has been driven by them into total chaos, and that's why they want to escape responsibility and are waiting to hear from us.
Вони хочуть уникнути відповідальності і очікують від нас відповіді.
Instead, the opposition has laid their own terms, demanding that Yanukovych sign a trade pact with the European Union that he had earlier rejected. And they want all political prisoners to be released. Meanwhile, protesters who laid siege to the International Convention Center in Kiev allowed some police to leave the building. Hundreds of protesters had occupied other government buildings in the capital, pressuring Yanukovych to step down.
Moscow residents of all ages withstood freezing temperatures around -15 degrees Celsius to build colorful snowmen at a youth scouting center in the capital. From a bride and groom to a Russian sailor to an Olympic ski champion, snowmen of all shapes and themes emerged by fast-moving, mittened hands and the building team's imagination. With a nod to the upcoming Sochi 2014 Winter Olympics, a team from a local grade school decided to create a champion athlete to represent their pride in Russian athletes. A Korean woman probably has the job we all dream of, eating for a living. Park Seo-yeon quit her job to pursue the online craze taking over her country. With a variety of foods sure to appeal to every palate, she sits down in front of her webcam and digs in, still while making money. This report has the details.
Park Seo-yeon lays a Korean feast in front of her computer. Then she turns on a video camera, she eats, and thousands of viewers watch her. This is the latest fad in South Korea, gastronomic voyeurism, in a country with one of the best internet connectivities in the world. Park, known as the Diva, broadcasts herself eating in her apartment for up to 3 hours every day. Viewers can chat with her or send virtual balloons that translate into cash.
People enjoy the vicarious pleasure with my online show when they can't eat that much, or don't want to eat food at night, or are on a diet.
She earns more than $9,000 a month doing this and has quit her job at a consulting firm. There are about 3,500 people in South Korea doing such online programs, some sponsored by restaurants. Some say it makes eating alone feel less awkward.
It feels as if I'm eating that much food with her. I think that's what the show is about. And probably it's comforting for people who eat alone.
In South Korea, one-person households could comprise 1/3 of the population in 15 years, the fastest rate among developed countries.
And And we start sports with some tennis and the Australian Open men's finals. Stanislas Wawrinka held firm in a match of high drama to defeat an injured Rafael Nadal 6-3, 6-2, 3-6, 6-3. Nadal struggled with an apparent back injury and, though restricted with his movement, fought back with a barrage of clean hitting, completely throwing the Swiss off his game in the third set. Despite the setback, Wawrinka stayed cool when it counted, serving strongly and sealing his maiden Grand Slam title. We stay in sunny Australia and the Tour Down Under. Local champion Simon Garans stayed out of trouble in the final stage to finish ahead of compatriot Cadel Evans and became the first rider to win the race for a third time. Going into the last stage, Garans held a 1-second lead over 2011 Tour de France winner Evans and was 5 seconds ahead of Italy's Diego Ulissi. Winning the title with his Australian team Orica Green Edge on the country's National Day made it a special occasion for the 33-year-old rider. And finally, cold and partly cloudy conditions continue tonight with a chance for light rain. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperatures expected with a continued chance for rain, accompanied by thunder and hail. Winds will be southwesterly moderate to brisk, blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect fair weather tomorrow, with southerly moderate to fresh winds and choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King commends the role and contributions of women in Parliament as part of his efforts to maintain an open dialogue with parliamentary blocs. International mediator Lakhdar Brahimi says he is optimistic about the Geneva conference despite stalled talks over easing the humanitarian crisis in Syria. And Egypt's interim president's announcement that a presidential vote will be held before parliamentary elections is met with mixed reactions from the Egyptian people. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching and have a good night.